Anna Key, and I'm the Associate Director of the Drupal Association. And this is, I talked to maybe 30 companies in my first week. And before I could even get to my pitch, the companies were saying, well, no, how can I help you? What do you need? And they were offering to do sponsorship support, or more code contributions, or how they can get more involved with camps. And I was just really blown away and realized this job is awesome. So what I realized is that I am actually more of a conduit for the community, and so is Richard. And so Holly Ross and the Drupal Association works with the community, works with all of you to find out what kind of needs you have and what needs to be funded. And then my job is to reach out to the business community and crowdsource those funds and just deliver them to where we can make the biggest impact. And so really, it's not a sales job at all. I'm really quite a servant for the greater good of the community, which is just a wonderful opportunity and something very unique and special for me. And so let me just give you a quick example of how we do this. So one of the ways the Drupal Association is helping the community is by improving Drupal.org. And last year, we needed to raise some funds so that we could hire developers and a project manager and fly people in for sprints to get the Drupal.org Drupal 7 upgrade going. But we didn't have a lot of funds for that. We needed $200,000. And now this year, we have to raise $500,000 because we're now going to kind of level up our efforts for Drupal.org and create a technical team that will spend their time just really making it better for developers to collaborate, make it easier for site builders, and make it faster to onboard new talent. And so we created the supporting partner program, and the Drupal business community stepped up and joined this, and I'm happy to say that we've had 38 partners step up and help fund the Drupal 7 upgrade. That's great. I know, they're just wonderful. And so we had the funding for what we needed to do with our initial push. And I've been working with the partners to make this program even stronger. And so in the last 2 days, we've been putting the word out and talking about this newly designed program that's going to meet more of the business needs of the Drupal community. And it's just wonderful that I've had people already stop me in the hallways saying, oh, I want to participate. And so I want to thank those companies as well. And if you're one of those business owners that would like to join the program, just call me. I'd love to talk with you too. So anyhow, I just want to say this is just a wonderful opportunity to come into open source and really understand the true spirit of collaborating and making things happen together. So I'd like to just take an opportunity to ask the supporting partners to stand up so we can acknowledge you. So if you are a supporting partner, thank you. I love you guys. And now, if you have helped improve our community home, Drupal.org, whether it's the D7 upgrade or infrastructure or content, can you please stand up? Because I'd like to recognize you and all the things you're doing to make it easier for us to collaborate. There we go. I was like, there's so many of you. Okay, so anyhow, thank you for everything and talking about the supporting partner program with me afterwards, if you like. But in the meantime, we just have some housekeeping to get ready for the day. So since I can't read that far, okay, so we have today, we have BOFs, Birds of a Feather. If you are a business owner, there is a CXO BOF today. I think it's at 11:45, but check the boards. There's a lot of great BOFs that you should check out. We also want you to hear your stories and share the Drupal love for all those that are maybe in a session, aren't seeing what's happening somewhere else, or couldn't make it. So please participate by posting things to social media. We have some great events. One of the things we're always trying to do is grow adoption of Drupal, and we had the Blue Drop Awards tonight. So I hope you'll check that out. But before you do, you can also go hear more about the Drupal Association and get an update on some of the programs that we're implementing at our board meeting, which is an open board meeting. We have plenty of seats for you, so I hope you'll come and participate there. And of course, we have tons of other events, and it's always the social activity that really kind of helps bind this community together and kind of get us excited to continue doing what we do. And also, don't forget to stop by the bookstore. We have amazing swag, all kinds of t-shirts and pins. And you can also become a Drupal Association member. And if you are a member, you get a 5% discount. Room C120. And the discount. So some pro tips. Okay, we do have free internet, as you know. Just be mindful. If you have 10 devices, don't use them all. You'll bring everything down. Another tip is, as you're going to sessions, please make sure you're doing the evaluations. You can do them online. We really need this feedback so we can continue to grow the quality of our content. And then lastly, if you're not a vegan, if you're not gluten-free, please don't eat their food. Okay, I did it. Thank you so much, guys. Oh. And now Scott L. will be speaking next.
All right. So my name is Scott Lewer, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm grateful to Acquia for sponsoring me to talk for a couple of minutes before I introduce Karen McGrane. I'm the founder of a company called Digital Clarity Group. We're an industry analyst firm, much like a Forrester or a Gartner, but significantly smaller. We're kind of a disruptor a little bit, I guess, in this space, one could say. And our 10 analysts, kind of our role in the world really is to help large enterprises find innovative solutions to be able to do things like helping them, manage this digital experience, right? And we focus a lot of our careers on kind of studying the breadth of software in the space and who's innovating and who's changing things. And yes, we're also partly responsible for terms like web experience management and customer experience management and some of these things that purists might hate. So I'm sorry for that. Throw tomatoes at me now. But anyway, regardless of what you call it, it's a pretty exciting space to watch right now, right? There's so much innovation that's going on, and it's fun to watch all of the players. So we do evaluate technologies like Adobe, and we watch what Oracle is doing, and we watch what Sitecore is doing. But we find ourselves following open source, I think, more and more, and especially at DCG, this is one of the things that differentiates us from some of the other larger analyst firms. I've been known to kind of rail a little bit against kind of the notion of open sourcers waving that banner when they're trying to get into the enterprise and kind of wearing that on their coat sleeve as this is why you should work with us. Because as the buyers kind of shift to be more and more line of business, they care less about that you live by the rules of Git and that you are under GPL license, than they more care about how can you help me create that Iceland Air experience like kind of Dries showed the other day, right? What we advise them to do is really, and why our interest is so much in this space and following Drupal and some of your other competitors really, is it's all about innovation, ultimately. When we're advising them into how to make the best decisions to select technologies, for us, it's about features and functions are one thing, and that's great, but tomorrow they'll be old hat, right? It really is about agility and being able to support the way the web is going to grow and change, and all these things are going to change, and really that's what they need to be buying, is the ability to change. And so I think that Drupal specifically, Acquia specifically, other open source tools are out there really on the kind of cutting edge of this, and kind of it's the de facto way that you work. So that's why our significant interest in this space, and that's why I come to conferences like this and kind of watch what you guys are doing. I like, from the standpoint of I'm up here speaking on behalf of Acquia, and one of the reasons that I follow them is they do care a lot about the innovation and supporting innovation and seeing things move forward, specifically as they tailor their product more and more to larger and larger enterprises and kind of suit their needs, right? So some of the things that they've done in terms of furthering that is they've actually created a program here where anybody who's here can go to their booth and go check out and get access to their free tier. It's a way to experience Acquia Cloud completely for free, and you can get full access to things like the Acquia Network and Acquia Search and Mollum and things like that. So I think that's pretty cool. And I also like, as an industry watcher, I also like things, they just announced Acquia Media Drive, which is a very cool thing, and Drupal Commons 3.0 is now built on Drupal 7, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, all great stuff. But these are the tools, like the tools that you guys are building are the tools that, companies, Dries said a quote yesterday where he talked about, it's about shifting digital to the heart of their businesses. This is what folks are doing now. If they're not doing that, they're going to get disrupted, right? And so I think that really is what it's all about. So that's pretty awesome. Anyway, enough about all that. Let's get to the main event. So I want to introduce my good friend, Karen McGrane. Karen is a user experience and content strategy consultant, and she is the founder of Bond Art and Science. She was previously the vice president and national lead for user research at Razorfish, and over her 15-year career, she's led a major redesign initiative for really large publishers, folks like New York Times, Condé Nast, Time Life, The Atlantic. And she also works with a lot of financial services firms right now, leading the charge for them, firms like Fidelity and Wells Fargo, Citibank, JP Morgan. She's the author of a really awesome book that if you haven't read, you need to go pick up called Content Strategy for Mobile, published by A Book Apart. And she teaches design management at the School for Visual Arts in Manhattan. So this talk that she's about to give is awesome. Really awesome, and it's on a subject that's near and dear to my heart, so I love watching it. If you haven't heard her before, you're in for a real treat. If you have, then you know why that she says about herself that on a good day, she makes the web more awesome, and on a bad day, she just makes it suck less. So welcome, Karen McGrane.
I owe a lot of my professional success to Drupal. Now, I want to be clear with you guys. I have never installed Drupal. I do not know my Drupal username. If I ever find myself on the command line, it means that something in my life has gone horribly, horribly wrong. But understanding Drupal, like knowing how it thinks, knowing how it works with content, understanding how users interact with it, has really deeply informed how I think about the future of content. Honestly, I would not have the professional success that I have today if it weren't for this community. And seriously, guys, I am not just saying that to flatter you, although also, you look good today. But no, seriously, I am humbled and I am grateful and I am super excited to be here to talk to you about the future of content. So you can't really talk about the future of content without going back to where it all started, which was print. Print was awesome. You put words on paper, and they stayed there. You didn't have to worry about updating it all the time. You didn't have to worry about it changing around. See, we know how print works. The conventions, the techniques, the cues that we have to communicate meaning, everybody understands them at a glance. And then we had to go and invent the web, which I think we can all admit has been totally worth it, but man, is it a pain in the ass. The web, I'm kind of like a big computer history nerd, and the web just turned 20. And when you look at what happened at CERN, like why they did that, you realize that the very foundations of the web, hypertext markup language, the uniform resource locator, those things were invented with the express purpose that anyone, anywhere, could create a document that could be instantly updated and accessible globally. Think about that. I mean, it's nice when these kind of like milestone events happen because it gives us a chance to sort of step back from our day-to-day work and recognize just how transformational that is in the history of human communication. And so, 20 years, really? I mean, it's like not even close to enough time for us to appreciate and adapt to that change. And honestly, it's like the desktop web, it was just the start. For the last 20 years, we've been able to imagine that a web page was really just like a glorified print page, right? Except now, people are accessing the web through mobile devices. And it's really, I think this is what's really forced us to come to terms with the way that the web is different, the way that the web has always been different. We have to give up this shared hallucination that we've been operating under, that we have control over layout and presentation, that users are interacting with our content on essentially the same screen size, with essentially the same input devices. That's gone. It's not coming back. Because now, users, we have to adapt our content. Users are interacting with our stuff on mobile devices and tablets. Like, we just don't have the luxury anymore of making assumptions about what the screen resolution is, what kind of form factor, what kind of input device somebody's going to have. We can't get away with that anymore. And so this is the real transformation that we are going through right now, is recognizing that the web is fundamentally different. And this isn't going to stop. I am not a futurist by any stretch of the imagination. I am not here today to predict for you what's going to come next. I don't know what's going to capture the public's imagination next. But I do know that there will always be new devices and form factors. And whatever they are, we're going to have to get our content onto them. Maybe the future is, I don't know, smart TV. This, I think, really drives home the fallacy that we know anything about the way that the user is interacting with our content. And frankly, I think it really does start to suggest some of the limitations of trying to handle adaptation to different devices on the front end. The idea that the exact same content, or maybe more important, that the exact same page, the exact same container, is going to adapt to serve both a smartphone and a smart TV, it seems limiting, it seems constraining. And I'm not saying that it can't be done, but I'm also saying that when you get to that point, you start to say, well, maybe we need to consider some other alternatives. I know for a fact we're going to have to consider other alternatives when things like audio interfaces really become a reality, like having audio interfaces for an in-car system. So it's super easy to mock audio interfaces at this point. It's really easy to make fun of Siri. You know what else didn't work very well for a long time? Touch screens. Touch screens used to suck. You know how you'd go to the ATM and you'd have to get your finger angled just right to try to get the button push to recognize? Everybody made fun of touch screens. And then one day touch screens worked. They worked perfectly. And it changed everything about our industry and the way that we interact with this technology in ways that we have not begun to even comprehend yet. The same thing is going to happen with audio interfaces. I don't know when it's going to happen, 5 years, 15 years, 50 years, but audio interfaces will one day work, and it will transform human society. And think about getting your content, making your content flexible and adaptable so that it can go on an audio interface. Think about something as tiny and micro as the difference between the italics tag and the emphasis tag. Developers always ask, why do we have to bother parsing whether something's italics or emphasis when every major browser since the dawn of time has rendered emphasis as italics? Not on audio interfaces, they don't. One conveys styling, but one conveys tone of voice. So if we have that problem on parsing what the difference is in how we structure and style our content at the level of the tiniest little HTML tag, think about all of the bigger problems we're going to have in getting our content ready so that it can live on an audio interface. Think about how much better off we're going to be if we were to start trying to solve for that problem now, start trying to make our content future-friendly now. Also, it should kind of drive home that the problem of future-friendly content and the problem of accessibility are the same problem. And if we do the right thing now for accessibility, we're actually doing the right thing for everybody in the future. You guys know I'm not done talking yet, right? Maybe the future is Google Glass. I don't really think the future is Google Glass. I think Google Glass is going to be the Segway of mobile. But it does sort of suggest the problem of what it means to get your content under really diverse form factors. So Google released their UI specs and HTML templates a couple weeks ago. And the question kind of becomes, oh, right, Google's trying to tell you how they want you to format your content. If you've designed your content around your presentation, how easy is it going to be for you to get your content into their presentation? Or maybe the next big thing is watches. This is obviously not a real product. This is an artist's rendition. But the rumor is that both Apple and Samsung are working on a wrist-mounted display. Now, most people probably don't want to read a long document on their watch, but what if it's a combination of an accessible touchscreen and a wireless audio interface that could read things to you? So now you've got the problem of figuring out how do you get your content into a format that is structured both for reading and for listening. Watches, so tiny. Maybe they're not the next big thing. Maybe the next big thing is stadium scoreboards. Get your content where everybody can see it. This is a joke. I put this in here as a joke. It's funny, right? Like, it's just to contrast the problem. It's contrast the size of the tininess of the watch and the bigness of the scoreboard. And I thought this was super funny. And then I turned around and I had a client tell me that one of their biggest problems right now is digital signage. It's a university. They bought a whole bunch of screens that they want to put up all over campus, and so they need a way to manage and publish their content to these digital screens. And I was like, so are you just going to have like a separate workflow and manage publishing to these screens manually? And they were like, no way. Ain't nobody got time for that. See, right now, they're like, we don't have the resources or the time. What we need is a way where we can get our content. We can get things like events listings and campus alerts to show up on our website, on our mobile app, and on our digital signage. And we need a way to manage that content all in one place and have it update automatically. This isn't some crazy futuristic dystopia that they live in. This is real. This is a real problem that they really have to solve right now. Maybe in the future, you're going to want a similar thing. Maybe you're going to want something for your home, like an internet refrigerator. We can't talk about the future without the internet refrigerator, right? It's like as if not being able to check email in the 30 seconds that it takes to grab a Diet Coke is the biggest problem facing our society. But what if your cooktop was a giant iPad interface, a giant iPad screen? Would your video content and your recipe content be ready to go there? Or what about the problem that I do think is one of the most important facing our society, and that is what happens when toaster printers become a reality? Is your content going to be adaptable to appear on delicious toast? These are the problems that we are here to solve together. So we know, right now, we know that our content already has to live on all sorts of different device types and form factors and screen sizes and resolutions. These are the problems we have today. And tomorrow, these problems are going to get even worse. There's going to be even more new devices. Some of them we haven't even considered yet. And so when I look at this problem, I really want to emphasize, especially to this crowd, this isn't just a front-end problem. Okay? Now, I had to be careful about how I talk about this because this is the kind of thing people get religious about, but responsive design is just one technique in our arsenal to help us survive this zombie apocalypse of all these new devices and platforms. And the challenge that we're facing is not just a front-end problem. And more to the point, it is not just a solution that we can solve on the front end, we have to also change the way our content management systems work. We need solutions that happen on the back end. And the reason for this, the root of it, is that in order to adapt to the future, future-friendly content means true separation of content from presentation. We're going to have to support way too many different outputs, way too many different form factors to assume that we can couple content with form. We can't assume that the container of the page is going to keep its integrity on all these different form factors. Do you have any idea what a huge shift this is in the history of human communication? I mean, for most of human history, you couldn't produce a document without tying the meaning of the document and the appearance together. There was literally no way to separate them. It would be almost absurd to suggest that you could do so. All of the cues that we have, all of our semantic cues as to priority and weight and relationships among content, all of those come through visual styling. Now, we need new tools. We need new processes to be able to change that, to achieve that. And it's easy, when I talk about this, to think that when I say separate content from presentation, what I really mean, what I'm really saying is get your HTML out of my content. Like, get your chocolate out of my peanut butter. And that is part of the problem, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. When Dan Jacobson, the API guy from Netflix and formerly from NPR, says that the future of content management systems is in their ability to capture the content in a clean, presentation-independent way, it is tempting to reduce that to a problem with markup, thinking that we can solve the problem just by getting rid of rich text editors. I rail against these rich text editors all the time. I talk about the limitations of blobs. You know, I'm really frustrated with this notion that we're just giving our content creators a big bucket in which they can dump whatever they want. They can style their tool with content with tools that work just like Microsoft Word. They add tables and custom bullets, and they make the text purple Comic Sans, and they float it to the right. Blobs are limiting because of all this formatting. The meaning doesn't translate when you take it to another platform. So, along the way, I've kind of gotten the reputation of being the president of the WYSIWYG Haters Club, which is true. I'm glad to see that you guys are on board with this message, because otherwise my graffiti crime spree would have to continue. So people kind of assume that I must be some sort of markdown evangelist, like, oh, well, let's give them markdown codes. Well, the problem's not the toolbar. I don't care if users make true semantic headings and bulleted lists with a toolbar or markdown codes. The problem with WYSIWYG is that we are allowing content creators to treat the web like it's print. Where do you think WYSIWYG came from? It came from Xerox PARC, because they invented the laser printer. Think about that. Before the laser printer, Xerox machines could only make copies of an existing document. They invented a way that you could print out whatever you want, but they needed a way for you to actually create that document. They invented the graphical user interface and the concept of what you see is what you get because they invented the laser printer. So the laser printer was arguably the most important component of the desktop publishing revolution. A lot of work went into ensuring that bitmap rendering and printer drivers were in sync. The tools for content creation and content output were really tightly coupled. And you can directly peg the adoption of graphical user interfaces and thus the entire personal computing revolution to demand for laser printers. I gotta break some news to you guys. The web's not a laser printer. Problem with WYSIWYG isn't that we have a toolbar at the top of the screen. The problem is that we are using an antiquated metaphor from the desktop publishing era to communicate to content creators what it means to publish on the web. We're letting them get away with imagining that publishing a web page is just like printing out a Word document. Now, that model was okay. It was like training wheels when all we had was the desktop web. But now we live in the future. Content chunks get remixed on the fly. Different chunks appear on different pages on different platforms. Which chunks appear where is subject to metadata and business rules. The job of content creators in this environment is changing. It needs to change. Our job is to build new tools, new interfaces, new metaphors to help them achieve this. This is going to be hard, okay? This is a tough fight. It's a battle. It's a war. It is a war between blobs versus chunks. Sloppy blobs where there's no distinction between content and form, and clean, presentation-independent, flexible chunks. This war isn't about markup. It's about mental models. It's a fight between old, outdated processes and metaphors of content publishing derived from print versus the new approaches that we have to start inventing right now if we're going to survive the future. And this is why I'm so excited to talk to you guys. You guys are chunk army. It is time to go to war against the blobs. All right, Team Chunk, here's our battle plan. We got to have structured content, okay? No more relying on a giant field that says content goes here. We got to work with content creators to model their content types and define the structures needed to support true multi-channel publishing. We've got to find ways to communicate the meaning that's encoded in visual styles. We've got to replace presentation and formatting with semantic metadata. We've got to break away from the idea that content lives on pages and instead enable authors to maintain all of the different content objects and metadata associated with a content type in one content package. They've got to be able to target those objects by platform then. And so all of this means a different kind of author experience, a new user experience for content creators. So let's talk about each one of these in turn, okay? Structured content. Now, I know you guys get structured content, okay? Drupal is not a blob CMS. So the challenge here, though, is breaking out of our page-based mindset. We've got to figure out the right level of granularity to get different structures, content structures, to appear on different platforms. So Amazon actually has a really well-structured content model for their products. Like the underlying structure is not their problem. Their problem is figuring out whether their existing content structures will support new platforms and what they're going to do if they don't work. So even just looking between the desktop and the smartphone form factor, you start to see some questions. Like, not every object from the desktop will work on every platform. So how do we decide what to keep, and how do we decide what to get rid of? If we exclude it from one platform, does that mean we should exclude it from the others? And if not, well then, how do we target things? If you handle the transformation between platforms on the front end, that means that there has to be a one-to-one mapping between pages. So the page is like a container, and how much you put into it might vary by platform. So Amazon here, they decided to break a long product page into several shorter pages on mobile. So what that means is that text that was previously used as headings is now being used as navigation. So these three options here, product features from the manufacturer, product description, those aren't sufficiently differentiated to tell me what I'm going to get when I tap. They worked fine when they were just headings in the context of a longer desktop page. But now, they serve as navigation. And if I come in with a question about the product, I don't know which one of these things to tap on in order to get my question answered. Same thing with the summaries. So they've done everybody's favorite technique, which is they took some text from the desktop and they truncated it to use as a navigation summary. Here's the problem. These summaries, all they do is repeat the product name and the zoom and megapixel features from the product title over and over and over again. These navigation summaries that are truncated body text, they don't convey any new information, and they don't tell me what I'm going to get when I tap. Other than the product title, every single word on this screen is wasted. So, when you think about like the stuff we have from the desktop, like we're going to have some fallbacks. We're going to have other options. So, what about giant tables or giant infographics or flash videos or content that appears in hover states? We got to figure all this out. I gave a talk recently where I outlined these challenges, and a woman raised her hand and said, "We're going to use responsive design." I'm like, responsive design not going to fix your content problem. Responsive design does not answer any of these questions for you. Or another way to say that is, whether your solution is client-side, server-side, or some combination, you still have to make the underlying decisions about how your content is structured and what level of granularity you have in order to get content onto different platforms. Second problem we got to solve is that we have to figure out how we can replace presentation and styling information that describes what something looks like with metadata that describes what it means. And that's not a technology problem. I want to be clear. Pretty much everything I'm talking to you about today, this is not a technology problem. It is a human problem. We are going against centuries of history in which what it meant to create a document, people relied on visual cues to communicate meaning. We have to replace styling choices with something more adaptive so that the author's intent, what they meant, can make the leap across platforms. Back in the 1980s, TV Guide was the most popular magazine in America. Don't ever tell me that Americans don't read. So if TV Guide had thought of themselves as just a magazine, they might have been okay with publishing their program descriptions just on paper. And so in print, really valuable data, like the program name, the genre, the length, the network, even the names of the actors, those are encoded solely through visual styling by making the text bold or all caps. If all of that data was locked up in Quark files with only visual cues to tell you what it meant, it wouldn't have any value. So TV Guide, back in the 80s, they realized that they weren't in the magazine publishing business. They were in the content publishing business. So they built this green screen mainframe application way back when that forced their content creators to capture this content with the appropriate semantic metadata. And so that means that this content has stood the test of time. If you were to look at a program description for a show that aired in the 1980s on your cable box or your TiVo or even on your iPhone screen, it is the exact same content that appeared in the magazine decades ago. That's because they had metadata. Guardian faced a similar problem when they launched these things called topic pages. So topic pages are these things where they can automatically pull all of the content that matches a particular taxonomy term or a particular proper noun and aggregate it all on one page. Great for SEO. So when they first launched, they had this really prominent box for top story. Problem is, they had no way to know what the top story was. The content from the print edition, when it hit the CMS, it didn't have any priority metadata attached to it. So in this scenario, their solution was to get their editors to do more work. So they asked their editors, okay, every time a story hits the CMS, you go in and assign it a rating, 1 to 5. Here's the thing. They have a ton of information about editorial priority. It is all conveyed in the layout of the print edition. Cues like the size and the styling of the headlines, the number of columns and column inches devoted to the story, the size of the image, the layout and the placement on the page, all of those convey priority meaning across time. So when it came time to publish an iPad app, they had a different story. They wrote an algorithm to read the layout of the print edition and derive editorial priority metadata from it. Woo! Hey, hold on there. And so they use that data to determine the hierarchy and the placement of the stories in the app. Now, I'm going to direct this maybe to this person over here. I do not think that the future of the internet is artificially intelligence-backed Dreamweaver, okay? I do not think that what we can do is allow content creators to apply whatever styling they want and then get robots to sort it out on the back end, okay? Newspapers have a really rigidly defined visual language and hierarchy, and so it is possible to parse semantic meaning from the styles that they choose. Your average small business owner, government employee, website content creator, they make random styling choices for their websites that don't necessarily always neatly match up with semantic meaning. So, but I tell this story simply to illustrate the challenge that we face in trying to make the leap across platforms, how we can't rely on styling decisions made for one platform to communicate meaning on another platform. I love these two quotes. I use them all the time. The first one, metadata is the new art direction. It reminds us that the approach that we used in print, where an art director has made layout choices for every page, that has to be replaced by a new, more dynamic approach that works across platforms. We need a new language to communicate that. And the second tells us that the effort that we put in to adding metadata to our content today, to trying to describe our content more fully, this is what's going to pay off when we have to get it on new platforms in the future. So the third thing, then, third problem that we need to solve is how to support content authors to create and manage content chunks that will be dynamically published to different platforms according to a set of metadata and business rules. We have to get authors to stop thinking about making web pages and start thinking about managing content packages. And so they need interfaces that will allow them to create and maintain different chunks of content all in one place, and then have interfaces that will allow them to target or control which chunks appear on which platforms. I think everybody at this point is probably familiar with this NPR example called COPE, stands for Create Once, Publish Everywhere. It gets talked about a lot in terms of their API strategy, but I like to use it as an example of a content package. See, each article content type that NPR has a whole bunch of different content objects associated with it. Sure, they've got a headline and the article body, but they've also got an audio file and 2 sizes of teasers and multiple images. And so each individual platform can make its own choices about which of these content objects it displays. And the content author has one single interface where he or she can manage all of those content elements in one place. And what this means is that too often we have content, like the way that we think about the web now is that we have content that is attached to a particular page. We have a marketing headline and a product tout that lives on a landing page. Content can't live on pages anymore. We need to manage content packages. And so what that means is that we need a new kind of author experience. We need to create a new author experience that encourages content creators to add the appropriate structure, to use semantic metadata rather than styling to communicate meaning, to manage packages of content that can be dynamically targeted to multiple places. And I know, I will tell you, whenever I talk about this stuff, people always come up to me and they're like, but Karen, content creators hate this. They hate it. They hate the fields. They don't want the fields. They tell us they want it to work like Microsoft Word. WYSIWYG is what they understand. I know that you are trying to do right by your users, by your content creators, by giving them what they say that they want. Problem is, UX doesn't work that way. User experience design does not work that way. See, these people, they're driving buggies, and we are building cars. When you ask them what they want, of course they say they want it to work the way that they're familiar with. They say they want faster horses. This is a quote, an apocryphal quote from Henry Ford. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. He didn't actually say this, and I don't care. This quote gets used so often because I think it really captures the challenge that we face in getting people to adapt to new technology. We have to give them what they need, not what they say they want. We have to give them new tools, a new mental model for how publishing works on the web. You know who else has had to change their mental model based on how the web works? Graphic designers. So many print designers have had to change their tools, their process, and really their underlying values system, their most deeply held beliefs about what good design is. They had to radically change all of that to adapt to the web. I've watched them succeed. I know it can be done. They gave up pixel-perfect layouts in favor of embracing the fluid, flexible nature of the web. If graphic designers can do it, content creators can too. But we have to help them. We have to stop building them faster horses and instead embrace the multi-device future. Which brings me to in-place editing. You guys didn't think you were going to get out of this whole talk with me bringing this up, did you? So I want to preface this by saying I'm not categorically opposed to this as an editing interface. I think there are specific, albeit limited, scenarios under which this will benefit content creators. But this is not a usability panacea. See, the problem is, right when we need a new metaphor, right when we need a new mental model to convey to content creators that their content will appear in a variety of different contexts, you are encouraging them, you are forcing them to imagine that the real version of their content is the desktop website. Now, I think it is fantastic that you have made the Drupal admin interface responsive. I think that is a monumental achievement. But allowing users to do in-place editing from a mobile phone does not solve this problem. You get that, right? So I can tell just by looking at this thing that this is something ginned up by somebody in marketing to make Drupal seem easy to use. Which is not the same thing as being easy to use. I am sure this looks great in sales demos, but when your shiny new feature has its collision with the real world, you are going to discover that it doesn't necessarily solve your usability problems. In some cases, it's going to make them worse. In some cases, you're going to make the author experience even more confusing because users have to understand the underlying content structure and metadata. So if this isn't the future of Drupal UX, then what is? So I'm convinced from everything I know about this space, all the work that I've done, that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for content management. There's no perfect author experience that will work for every company's content model, for every company's workflow. And so what that means is that the future of Drupal UX is you. You were hoping I was going to say robots, right? I know, I'm sorry. No, it's you guys. You. You are the ones making decisions about how your content creators interact with the admin interface that you create. You are the ones making choices about the content model and metadata. You are the ones who will invent the future. The future, this isn't a problem that gets solved in Drupal core. Trust me, there's a lot of fantastic work being done there to make the framework better, to make some smart default choices. But the real magic is in the decisions that you make to customize the admin interface and the workflow for your content creators. Drupal gives you unparalleled flexibility in doing this. I'm standing here right now, I kind of want to say to you guys, do you even know what you have here? Do you know how awesome this is? But you guys, you got to use your power wisely. So the theme of this conference, building bridges, connecting communities. And so that's why you invite somebody like me from an outside community like user experience and content strategy to come in and give a keynote. And I think maybe there's some thought that maybe I'm going to use this as an hour-long infomercial for my discipline to be like, you got to hire more UX designers, and you don't get to do that. Content strategists do that. I'm here to do the exact opposite. Now, don't get me wrong. Many of you would benefit from partnering with UX and content strategy people. They are great. But I'm here to help you help yourselves. In fact, I'm here to show you the bridge to my communities. And you can walk over it, and you can take advantage of some of the things that we have to offer you. See, you are a content strategist. I guarantee you right now that you are doing content modeling. You are planning the content lifecycle, even if you don't call it that. Maybe you should. Maybe you could charge more money for it. Content strategy community has a ton of people from the content management space participating. We have all kinds of resources and tools to help you get better at making decisions about how you structure your content, how the content lifecycle works. We would welcome you. Sarah Wachter-Boettcher's book, Content Everywhere, and Anne Rockley's book, Managing Enterprise Content, these are two indispensable resources for people who are trying to solve the kind of problems that I'm talking about. If, hypothetically, you were to want to buy my book, Content Strategy for Mobile, you could totally do that, but I promise, no infomercial. You know what else you are? You are an information architect. You are making decisions right now about categories and taxonomy and navigation and labeling on your projects. You are doing the work of an IA. And I think some of you are doing it without any information or knowledge on how to actually do it well. And I'm not here to berate you for that. I am here to say there are lots of resources that can help you. Lou Rosenfeld and Peter Morville's book, Information Architecture, is a classic in the field. Donna Moorer's book on card sorting is this short, straightforward little book that will teach you a simple research technique to help you figure out what the right categories and what the right labeling is for your project, okay? Doing this, it is not time-consuming, it is not expensive, and it will make a better author experience. So the IA community really recognizes the need to have somebody like me reach out to people like you. Lou Rosenfeld, he's the guy who wrote this book. He's also the publisher of most of the other books that I'm showing here. His stature in the IA community, he's like our Dries. So he threw down to the IA community recently that we need to focus on the 95% of people who are never, ever, ever going to call themselves information architects, but who need some basic IA skills to do their jobs. That's you. My job is not to build more information architects. My job is to make sure that people like you can do a better job of making choices about taxonomy and labeling and hierarchy. And we want to help you with that. And so finally, you are a UX designer. You are right now designing the interfaces that people have to use to do their jobs. I'm not saying you might necessarily be an amazing visual designer or interaction designer on the front end. I don't know, maybe you are, I don't know your life. But I do know that the choices that you make about how the Drupal admin interface works means that you design user experiences. You design user experiences for the most important user, the content creator. And you have a couple of things. You have two things that make you incredibly powerful. You have things that my UX peers would kill to get their hands on. Number one, you have access to real users. They're your clients. They're your coworkers. They're the people you work with every day. That might not always be the case, but I'm going to assume that the average Drupal developer gets more in-person hands-on time with the people who will be using the system that you design than the average UX designer does. And so second, what you have in Drupal is this powerful prototyping tool. You have this powerful tool. I have seen it in action, where you can make real functional interfaces that actually work the way the content creator is going to engage with them, maybe even using real content. And you can oftentimes mock these things up faster than I can make a wireframe. And I gotta tell you, I can make some wireframes. So start teaching yourself to be a UX designer. Start learning the techniques that make interfaces easy to use. Make a software interface, an enterprise software interface that's aimed at expert users. Figure out what it takes to do that well. Learn how to prototype and test and iterate. Start inventing these interfaces. The world needs you to have these skills. These aren't skills just for my community to have, be like, no, 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 this is our job. You have to do this because you know what? You already are doing it, whether you recognize it or not. I'm going to let you in on one of my beliefs, one of my little secret beliefs. I am convinced that some of the really innovative ideas for how to model and manage future-friendly content are going to come from the Drupal community. Like you guys, you have a fantastic platform. It's like you can't invent this stuff from a standing start. You have this framework that's already built on. You just need to figure out how to frame these problems so that they are aimed at the future of how people are going to need to manage content, rather than trying to solve problems based on an outdated mental model of how print works. Let me leave you with this. The web, it's not print. Now, we have millennia of history in creating print documents where there's absolutely no distinction between content and form. And we got about 20 years of web publishing under our belt. Okay? This is a Gutenberg-level transition that we are all going through right now, guys, and it is perfectly fine for us to acknowledge that we're not quite there yet. But it's time now, with this explosion of different devices, it's time that we recognize that the techniques that we have used in the past will not work in the future. That the way that people create content has to change. The tools, the interfaces, the processes that people use to create content have to evolve. We can't rely on print-based metaphors that tie content to pages anymore, whether those pages are sheets in our laser printer or web pages on our desktop. Our content can and will have to live on many different platforms. And so it's our job to help content creators understand how the future of content works. I think this community is beautifully positioned to tackle this problem, maybe more than any other community I know out there. You have a powerful, flexible framework. You have an innovative, smart community of developers. And you have access to real users where you can prototype and test new interfaces. You guys are the ones who are designing the user experience for content creators. So start thinking like a UX designer. Start thinking like a content strategist. And go out there and invent the future. Thank you.
All right, well, that was outstanding.
Thank you.
Guess what we had a lot of questions on?
Is it WYSIWYG?
It might be.
I love it.
All right, so we had a bunch of questions tweeted, and they all boil down to: are we making a mistake with WYSIWYG and in-place editing? Are we giving users something that's bad for them that they shouldn't have? Are we giving them bacon instead of an apple?
I think that, like I said, at the very moment where the problem we're trying to solve is giving users a new mental model, it seems like some of these solutions are really focused on an outdated model. And I want to say, I'm very sympathetic to the challenge that everybody is facing in that you got to sell. You got to sell this product. You got to go in and talk to people about what the product does. And it's easy to, I think it is sort of easy to fall into the trap of being like, okay, well, let's make it look easy to use and then they'll want to buy it. And I think there probably is some place for that. I'm not saying throw out in-place editing, but I don't think that you should treat WYSIWYG and in-place editing and some of those other choices as a panacea. I think you can say, okay, we're doing this for these purposes, but it doesn't solve, it doesn't change the fact that we also have to sort out content packages, structured content, metadata, and the author experience. You can do both.
So a question from Damien McKenna and Spry Daniel is, how do we handle editorial needs to interject meta content within content, like links and let's see, formatting tweaks, if we're not using WYSIWYG?
Yeah, so I'm trying to emphasize this. I want to be clear. I'm not opposed to a toolbar. I am not opposed to semantic markup. I am not opposed to letting people add headings or links or bullet points or whatever. I am opposed to giving people the illusion that their content is, that their web page is like a print document. And I think a lot of the tools that we build do encourage them to think that way, rather than forcing them to say, hey, right, you have all these different fields, you have all these different chunks. Some of them need styling information attached to them, some of them don't. I think we could just do a lot better of peeling some of that back and not taking the easy way out of giving them a blob and a WYSIWYG toolbar all the time. Like, there's other better ways that we can solve that problem.
All right, so Bart Feenstra asked, so what's the problem with in-place editing as long as we're editing the chunks and not the blobs?
The problem, like I said, I'm not categorically opposed to it as one potential editorial feature that may, in specific, albeit limited cases, make things a little bit easier for people. But I think the idea that everybody's all excited about a new tool that prevents people from, that tries to make it so people aren't bothered by having to deal with all the fields and the metadata, you're doing that precisely at a moment where people working with the chunks and the metadata is of crucial and critical importance and will get even more so. And I think we have a responsibility as a community to say, hey, we've got to make an easy-to-use author experience that solves that problem, that solves the chunk problem, that solves the workflow problem. We're kind of punting if we're saying, oh, we'll just let them use the desktop front end and not worry about all that stuff. They hate it.
All right, so probably the hardest part of all this is how do we convince the clients? How do we talk to clients and convince them and get through all the organizational momentum against taking away this ability to have a WYSIWYG bar and to control their content and kind of give up control to the front end or the device or.
Yeah, I can only say that for my own experience, I've been talking about this stuff for a couple of years now, 2.5 years, and when I first started talking about it, I thought it was going to be this weird little niche topic where I was like, haha, what if I talk about my nerdy IA and content strategy stuff and what that means for supporting content across different platforms with APIs. And I've been shocked myself personally at how much attention this topic has gotten and how resonant it seems to be in the industry. It's like, I wouldn't be standing in front of 3,000 of you right now if there weren't some real impulse from people to say, hey, this is important. So, I'm like, my sales process is obviously different from Drupal, but I'm not having trouble going out to talk to people about the challenges that they're going to face with multi-device content. In fact, I find it to be a topic that most people are really welcoming. And so I would assume that if you guys came out really strong and said, clean, presentation independent, flexible content model, publishing content with APIs, there's a lot of people out there who would buy that. They may not be the buyer, you may be trying to talk to a different kind of buyer, but that's, and that just raises bigger issues around how you are framing what Drupal is.
So you mentioned earlier about authoring on mobile. How important is that moving forward? Do you think that as a community, should we focus on making desktop authoring the way to do it and easy? I mean, is it something where, should we be really concerned about making sure content editors and authors can have a really good experience and fill in all those chunks on their phone? Or where do you see things as far as that?
I mean, I will say that Drupal is a piece of enterprise software, you know, a content management system for a content creator. That is something people are mostly going to be doing at their desks. And it is perfectly okay for us all to say, yes, the main problem that we are trying to solve with content authoring is that the editorial, the admin experience is always going to be the desktop experience. Now, I think it's awesome that you are allowing people to create and update content from their mobile devices. I certainly see that that's a need and that people will want to be able to do that. It might not be the primary use case, but it's awesome that you can do it. But, you know, this is, but still, like, this is a, on the admin side, if it's a desktop software usability problem, and what we're trying to do is use that admin interface to communicate a new mental model to people of the idea that their content is going to live in lots of different places. And you know, the fact that you have a mobile interface to do that as well, it might kind of help, but really it's a mental model problem.
So one thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, but in your book, available on Amazon, you said you wouldn't pimp it, so I would. You talk about the preview button and how the preview button is kind of a fallacy. Because when you preview something on your desktop, you know, you might not be seeing, you know, you're seeing how it looks on the desktop, but everything you're talking about is author it in one place and have it available everywhere.
Yeah.
So do you have a vision for what a good preview button should be?
Yeah.
I mean, should it be something like, I think it's responsinator.com, that you can pull up a website and it'll show you on a tablet and on a phone?
Yeah.
What should a really good preview functionality include?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The preview button is a lie. I mean, you hit the preview button and you go to the desktop version of the web page. That's not where it's going to go. So I think that, I do think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff kind of done in this space to say, when you hit that preview button, let's show content creators several different implementations, like maybe a desktop and a mobile app or mobile website. You know, like for my university client, maybe when they hit preview, they really do need to see the website and the mobile app and their digital signage, you know, in some kind of mock-up. So one solution to that is simply to build in a new preview layer that maybe doesn't show every single context in which the content will appear, but tries to show some of it. Personally, I think the real challenge there isn't previewing a page, but rather taking something like a small chunk of content, like a headline or a navigation summary or images, and showing the idea that those chunks can live in multiple places. You have a product page that has a product summary, and that product summary lives on the landing page, whereas the product description lives on the product page. That challenge, getting users to wrap their head around that, I think is one of the biggest things we're trying to solve, and preview might be one of the tools that we use to do that.
All right, so last question. So it's kind of a bigger topic. So yesterday in Dries' keynote, he was talking about things that we should be doing, or maybe Contrib should be doing, to bring us up to be able to do web experience management with the big boys. So it kind of feels like in some cases we're playing catch up and we're trying to add these features so that we can be what other things are.
Yeah.
As a community, what can we do to kind of reverse that or to leapfrog things so that rather than us looking at what proprietary software is doing, how can we get in front of that so that people are looking at what we're doing?
Yeah, I think, I think it is really tempting to go after the audience that other packages, other tools are trying to attract. And I mean, it's like, I can see where that comes from. I know how you do that, but you guys you're not gonna compete against Adobe CQ by trying to be Adobe CQ. You're gonna compete against Adobe CQ by trying to be Drupal, and by doing what Drupal does really well. And that's where it's like, hey, you guys, I mean, you have this platform, you have this framework. Like, you have the idea of a flexible content model built in. You have this like really powerful prototyping tool. You have something that other people don't have and cannot easily build. And you have something that I really do believe is uniquely well positioned to tackle the problems of future-friendly content. And I guess it's just like, I would love to see you capitalize on what Drupal is great at.
All right, well, thank you very much, Karen McGrane.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, so I think we have a break next, and then session start. So have a good day. Go Drupal.
Can we go thrift shopping?
What?
Oh!